In a small, picturesque town surrounded by lush green hills and endless fields of golden wheat, excitement buzzed in the air. The annual cooking competition was just days away, an event that brought together amateur chefs from all over the region. This wasn't some fancy, high-stakes contest held in a glittering city. It was a humble gathering where people shared their love for food, creativity, and community. Every year, the competition drew crowds of locals eager to see who could whip up the most delicious dish. It was a tradition steeped in laughter, camaraderie, and of course good eating. This year, however, something, or rather, someone, stood out amidst the usual flurry of activity. Among the contestants milling about, setting up their stations at the bustling community center, there was Clara Bennett. She was a woman in her late 50s with soft, kind eyes and hands that bore the marks of years spent kneading dough, chopping vegetables, and stirring pots. Her presence was calm and unassuming, almost blending into the background. But it wasn't just her demeanor that caught people's attention. It was what she carried with her. Clara arrived carrying only a plain wooden box, its surface worn smooth from years of use. Inside, nestled carefully among soft cloths, were ingredients that seemed almost laughably simple: potatoes, onions, eggs, butter, fresh herbs, and a few other staples. There were no exotic spices or imported delicacies, no fancy gadgets or elaborate setups, just basic everyday items you'd find in any kitchen pantry. To the onlookers, it looked like she had wandered into the wrong room entirely. As Clara quietly unpacked her things and arranged them on her assigned station, whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Contestants glanced at each other, eyebrows raised, smirks tugging at the corners of their mouths. "Is she serious?" one young man muttered under his breath, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Another competitor, a confident woman with a sleek apron embroidered with her initials, leaned over to her neighbor and said, "She doesn't look like she belongs here." Even the judges, seated at their table near the front, exchanged skeptical glances as they watched Clara move methodically around her space. But Clara didn't seem to notice, or if she did, she didn't let it bother her. She worked with a quiet focus, her movements steady and deliberate. She laid out her knives, checked the heat on the stove, and measured her ingredients with care. Everything she did radiated purpose, as though she knew exactly what she was doing, even if no one else could see it yet. For those watching, though, it was hard not to feel a sense of doubt creeping in. After all, this was a competition, and everyone else had come prepared to impress. One contestant, a tall man named Marcus, stood proudly beside his station, which resembled a mini gourmet grocery store. He had everything from truffle oil to rare mushrooms, and his cutting board gleamed with precision-cut slices of fresh produce. Another competitor, a young woman named Lily, was already plating a vibrant salad topped with edible flowers and drizzled with balsamic reduction. The contrast between their elaborate displays and Clara's modest setup couldn't have been starker. The skepticism grew louder as the clock ticked closer to the start of the competition. A group of teenagers leaning against the wall snickered as they pointed toward Clara. "What's she gonna make? Potato soup?" one joked, earning chuckles from his friends. An older couple sitting in the audience shook their heads, murmuring about how these contests are open to anyone these days. Even the MC, trying to keep the mood light, made a light-hearted comment about how sometimes simplicity is key, though his tone suggested he didn't quite believe it himself. Despite the growing tide of doubt and ridicule, Clara remained unfazed. She tied her faded apron around her waist, adjusted her hairnet, and took a deep breath. Her hands moved with practiced ease as she began peeling potatoes, the rhythmic scrape of the knife against the skin filling the air. Occasionally, she paused to glance at her notes, a single sheet of paper tucked neatly beside her ingredients. If anyone had bothered to ask, they might have noticed the faint smile playing on her lips, a quiet confidence that hinted at something deeper beneath the surface. To the casual observer, Clara appeared to be nothing more than a sweet elderly woman who had perhaps misunderstood the scope of the competition. But what they failed to realize was that every movement, every decision, every ingredient she had chosen was part of a plan honed over decades of experience. While others relied on flashy presentations and trendy techniques, Clara trusted in the power of simplicity and in the stories behind the food she created. As the timer started and the room erupted into a symphony of sizzling pans, clattering utensils, and shouted instructions, Clara continued working in her own quiet rhythm. She sliced the potatoes paper thin, layering them carefully in a cast-iron skillet greased with melted butter. She sprinkled salt and pepper with a light touch, then added a handful of fresh thyme leaves for fragrance. Each step was deliberate, each gesture infused with intention. And though no one paid much attention to her at first, there was a subtle magic unfolding in her corner of the room, a magic that would soon capture everyone's attention in ways they never expected. Little did the skeptics know, they were about to witness something extraordinary. What they saw as simplicity was actually mastery disguised as humility, and when the judging phase began, the truth would come to light, leaving the entire room speechless. For now, though, Clara worked in silence, letting her actions speak for themselves while the world around her buzzed with noise and assumptions. Clara Bennett's journey to that unassuming corner of the community center began long before anyone in the room could have imagined. Her story wasn't one of glitz or glamour, but of resilience, love, and a deep-rooted connection to food that had shaped her entire life. To truly understand who Clara was and why she stood so calmly amidst the chaos, you'd have to go back decades, to a time when her hands were smaller, her world simpler, and her dreams far less defined. Growing up in the same small town where the competition now took place, Clara's childhood was anything but easy. She was the eldest of 3 siblings, born into a family that struggled to make ends meet. Her mother worked tirelessly, juggling 2 jobs to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. By the time Clara turned 10, it became clear that someone needed to step up and take care of the household while her mother was away. That someone was Clara. At first, cooking wasn't about passion, it was necessity. Young Clara learned to boil water, fry eggs, and mash potatoes because those were the meals her family could afford. There were no recipe books, no YouTube tutorials, no fancy cooking shows to guide her. Instead, she relied on trial and error, watching her mother whenever she had a rare moment at home and mimicking what she saw. Mistakes were inevitable, a burnt pot here, an under-seasoned dish there, but each failure taught her something new. Slowly but surely, Clara began to find her rhythm in the kitchen. What started as survival soon blossomed into something greater. As Clara grew older, she discovered that cooking wasn't just about feeding people. It was about bringing them together. The smell of freshly baked bread wafting through the house would draw her siblings to the kitchen, their laughter filling the air as they waited impatiently for dinner. On special occasions, like birthdays or holidays, Clara poured extra effort into her dishes, determined to create moments of joy despite their modest means. Food became her way of showing love, of making the ordinary feel extraordinary. By the time Clara reached adulthood, her skills in the kitchen had become legendary within her close-knit circle of family and friends. Neighbors often stopped by to ask for advice on how to perfect a pie crust or get the seasoning just right in a stew. Yet despite the praise, Clara remained humble. For her, cooking wasn't about recognition. It was about connection. It was about turning simple ingredients into something meaningful, something that brought comfort and happiness to those she cared about. But life has a way of nudging us toward unexpected paths, and for Clara, that nudge came in the form of a local bake-off. One summer afternoon, her best friend convinced her to enter a pie contest at the county fair. "You've got nothing to lose," her friend had said with a wink. Clara hesitated. She didn't see herself as a competitor, but eventually agreed, mostly to humor her persistent friend. She spent hours perfecting her apple pie, using a recipe passed down from her grandmother. When the judges announced her name as the winner, Clara was stunned. She hadn't entered to win. She'd simply wanted to share a piece of her heart with others. But win she did, and the victory sparked something inside her. Encouraged by her success, Clara decided to try her hand at more competitions. At first, it was just local events, the kind held in church basements or town halls. But as her confidence grew, so did her ambitions. She traveled to nearby cities, then across states, entering contests that challenged her creativity and pushed her skills to new heights. Along the way, she encountered chefs who introduced her to techniques she'd never dreamed of, ingredients she'd never tasted, and cuisines that expanded her understanding of what food could be. Yet even as she absorbed these influences, Clara stayed true to her roots. No matter how elaborate the challenge, she always found a way to infuse her dishes with warmth and authenticity. Over the years, Clara's trophy shelf filled up faster than she could have imagined. She won awards for pies, cakes, casseroles, and everything in between. In total, she claimed 10 national championships, each one a testament to her dedication and talent. Her name appeared in culinary magazines, and invitations to prestigious events poured in from all corners of the country. Despite her growing fame, however, Clara chose to remain private. She declined interviews, turned down sponsorship deals, and avoided the spotlight whenever possible. To her, cooking wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about sharing love through food, one plate at a time. Eventually, Clara retired from the competitive circuit, returning to her quiet life in her hometown. She continued cooking, of course. How could she not? But now it was purely for pleasure. She hosted intimate dinners for friends, baked cookies for school fundraisers, and volunteered at the local shelter, serving meals to those in need. Cooking remained her greatest joy, though few outside her inner circle knew about her illustrious past. So why, after all these years, had Clara decided to enter this particular competition? The answer was simple: nostalgia. When she heard about the annual event being held in her own backyard, memories flooded back of simpler times, of standing shoulder to shoulder with neighbors in the same community center where she now stood. This wasn't about winning or proving herself. It was about reconnecting with the spirit of the town she loved. It was about remembering why she fell in love with cooking in the first place. As Clara layered the final touches onto her dish during the competition, she reflected on her journey. From the little girl trying to feed her family to the seasoned chef whose name once graced magazine covers, every step had led her to this moment. And though the skeptics around her couldn't see it yet, Clara knew that her story wasn't just hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever sat at her table, tasted her food, or felt the warmth of her hospitality. Unbeknownst to the crowd buzzing with whispers and laughter, they were witnessing not just a cook, but a legacy. A legacy built not on accolades or trophies, but on the belief that food has the power to heal, connect, and transform. All Clara had to do now was wait and let her dish speak for itself. The competition was in full swing, and the energy inside the community center crackled like a live wire. Contestants darted around their stations, chopping, stirring, sautéing, and plating with feverish intensity. The air was thick with the mingling aromas of garlic, caramelized onions, seared meat, and freshly baked bread. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, craning their necks to catch glimpses of the culinary magic unfolding before them. Cameras flashed as judges moved from station to station, jotting down notes and exchanging murmurs of approval or critique. It was a scene alive with excitement, and yet, in one corner of the room, Clara Bennett worked in quiet contrast to the chaos. Clara's station seemed almost comically understated compared to the elaborate setup surrounding her. While others showcased towering displays of exotic ingredients, truffles, artisanal cheeses, rare spices, and imported oils, Clara stuck to her humble arsenal of potatoes, onions, butter, eggs, and herbs. Her movements were deliberate but unhurried, her hands steady as she layered thinly sliced potatoes into a cast-iron skillet. She sprinkled salt and pepper with precision, drizzled melted butter over the layers, and added a few sprigs of fresh thyme for fragrance. There was no dramatic flair, no flamboyant gestures designed to impress the audience, just methodical practice steps that spoke of years spent perfecting her craft. To those watching, it all seemed so ordinary, and that's exactly what made it ripe for mockery. One by one, the whispers began to swell into audible laughter. Marcus, the brash young chef whose station overflowed with expensive ingredients and high-tech gadgets, couldn't resist. the temptation to join in. He glanced over at Clara's modest setup, his lips curling into a smirk. "What is she even making?" he said loudly enough for nearby competitors to hear. "Mashed potatoes? Maybe hash browns if we're lucky." His comment ignited a ripple of snickers among the other contestants. A woman named Lily, who had just finished arranging an intricate salad topped with edible flowers, chimed in. "I think she's trying to bake something," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "But honestly, I don't see how plain old potatoes are going to wow anyone." Others nodded in agreement, their eyes flicking toward Clara with barely concealed amusement. Even some members of the audience joined in, leaning over to whisper to their neighbors about the simple woman who didn't seem to belong in such a prestigious contest. Clara, of course, heard none of it, or if she did, she gave no sign. Her focus remained unwavering, her hands moving with the same calm efficiency they always had. She cracked eggs into a bowl, whisked them until smooth, and poured the mixture evenly over the layered potatoes. Then, with a practiced touch, she slid the skillet into the oven and set the timer. Each action was precise, each decision intentional. To anyone paying close attention, there was an undeniable rhythm to her work, a sense of mastery hidden beneath the surface. But most people weren't paying close attention. They were too busy laughing. As the minutes ticked by, the derision grew louder. A group of teenagers sitting near the front row pointed at Clara's station and giggled. "She's probably just here for fun," one of them joked. "Like this isn't even real cooking." An older man seated behind them shook, his head muttering under his breath about how these contests let anyone in these days. Even the MC, sensing the mood of the crowd, made a light-hearted quip about how sometimes simplicity can be surprisingly delicious, though his tone suggested he didn't quite believe it himself. Through it all, Clara stayed silent. She adjusted the heat on the stove, checked the progress of her dish through the oven window, and occasionally jotted down notes on a scrap of paper. Her expression never wavered. Her movements never faltered. If anything, she seemed to retreat further, into her own world, shutting out the noise around her. To the skeptics, this only confirmed their assumptions, that she was clueless, out of her depth, or perhaps simply oblivious to the ridicule swirling around her. But there was something else happening beneath the surface, something the critics failed to notice. As Clara worked, her mind wasn't focused on the jeers or the smirks. Instead, she was transported back to another time and place, to the cozy kitchens of her childhood, where she had first learned the art of turning simple ingredients into something extraordinary. She thought of her mother, standing over a hot stove after a long day at work, teaching her how to peel potatoes without wasting a single bit. She remembered the joy on her siblings' faces when they sat down to a meal she had prepared, even if it was nothing more than fried eggs and toast. And she recalled the countless hours she had spent experimenting, failing, and eventually succeeding in competitions across the country. Every slice of potato, every sprinkle of seasoning, every drop of butter carried meaning. This wasn't just a dish. It was a story of resilience, love, and the power of food to bring people together. Clara knew that the skeptics would understand none of this, not yet anyway. But she also knew that food has a way of speaking for itself, of cutting through doubt and disbelief with its sheer ability to delight the senses. As the timer buzzed and Clara removed her skillet from the oven, the aroma that wafted through the air stopped conversations mid-sentence. For a moment, the entire room fell silent. The golden crust glistened under the bright lights, and the scent of roasted potatoes, butter, and herbs filled every corner of the space. Even Marcus, who had been so quick to mock her earlier, paused mid-sentence, his nose twitching as he caught a whiff of the intoxicating fragrance. For the first time since the competition began, all eyes turned toward Clara. The laughter faded, replaced by curious stares and murmurs of anticipation. What had started as ridicule now shifted into intrigue. Could this unassuming woman have created something truly remarkable? Only time and the judge's verdict would tell. But one thing was certain. Clara Bennett had captured the attention of everyone in the room, whether they realized it or not. And as she carefully transferred her creation onto a serving platter, her hands steady and sure, Clara allowed herself a small, knowing smile. She didn't need validation from the skeptics or applause from the crowd. She had faith in her dish, and in the timeless truth that great food doesn't need to shout to be heard. The judging phase of the competition began with an air of anticipation that crackled through the room. Contestants lined up one by one, proudly presenting their creations to the panel of judges seated at a long table draped in white cloth. Each dish was met with varying degrees of enthusiasm, from polite nods of approval to bursts of delighted exclamations. The audience leaned forward in their seats, eager to hear the judges' reactions and speculate about who might take home the coveted trophy. When it was Clara's turn, she stepped forward carrying her cast-iron skillet, its golden crust gleaming under the bright lights. Her demeanor remained calm and composed, her movements unhurried as she placed the dish before the judges. She offered a brief explanation. "This is my grandmother's recipe for pomme dauphine," she said softly, her voice steady but warm. "It's a simple dish, but I've always believed that the best food comes from the heart." For a moment, the judges simply stared at the dish, their expressions unreadable. Then one of them picked up a fork and carefully cut into the perfectly layered potatoes. The crisp exterior gave way to reveal creamy, buttery layers beneath, releasing a wave of fragrant steam that made several people in the audience sigh audibly. The judge took a bite, closed his eyes, and paused. For a few seconds, there was complete silence in the room as everyone waited for his reaction. When he finally opened his eyes, his face lit up with astonishment. This is incredible," he said, his voice tinged with awe. Another judge leaned in, curious, and sampled a piece herself. Her eyes widened as she chewed, savoring the rich yet balanced flavors. "It's flawless," she murmured, shaking her head in disbelief. "The texture, the seasoning, it's absolutely perfect." One by one, the judges tasted Clara's dish, each of them visibly impressed. They exchanged glances, nodding silently as if confirming what they already knew. This was something special. Even the most skeptical among them couldn't hide their amazement. One judge, known for his sharp critiques, leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "I've judged hundreds of competitions," he admitted, "and I've never tasted anything quite like this. It's simple, yes, but it's also genius." The audience erupted into murmurs of surprise. People craned their necks to get a better look at Clara's dish, their earlier skepticism melting away. Marcus, who had been so quick to mock her earlier, now looked visibly embarrassed. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact with anyone nearby. Lily, the young woman with the elaborate salad, whispered to her neighbor, "I can't believe how good that smells." Even the teenagers who had giggled at Clara's expense were now sitting quietly, their jaws slightly agape. As the judges scribbled down their scores, the atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. What had started as a contest filled with flashy displays and bold flavors had suddenly become a lesson in humility and mastery. Clara's dish wasn't just delicious. It was a reminder that true skill often lies in simplicity, in knowing exactly how to elevate basic ingredients without overwhelming them. It was a revelation that left everyone reeling. When the MC finally called for quiet and announced the results, the tension in the room was palpable. Names were read aloud, accompanied by polite applause as runners-up accepted their ribbons and certificates. But when the MC reached the top prize, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "And the winner of this year's cooking competition is..." He paused for dramatic effect, scanning the crowd before landing on Clara. "Clara Bennett." For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then, as if on cue, the audience erupted into thunderous applause. Spectators rose to their feet, cheering and clapping as Clara made her way to the front of the room. Her face remained serene, though a faint blush colored her cheeks as she accepted the trophy from the head judge. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment for posterity, while the MC enthusiastically shook her hand. "Congratulations, Clara," the MC boomed into the microphone. "Your dish truly blew us all away. Can you tell us a little more about what inspired it?" Clara smiled warmly, gripping the trophy with both hands. "Thank you," she began, her voice clear and steady despite the spotlight shining down on her. "Like I said earlier, This recipe came from my grandmother. She taught me how to cook when I was very young, and she always said that food should bring people together. This dish may seem simple, but it's full of memories. For me, it represents family, love, and the joy of sharing a meal with others. Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom nodded in agreement or wiped away tears. In that moment, it became clear that Clara's victory wasn't just about winning a competition. It was about reminding everyone of the power of food to connect and inspire. After the ceremony ended, contestants and spectators alike flocked to Clara's station, eager to learn more about her technique and taste her award-winning dish. Marcus approached her hesitantly, his earlier bravado replaced by genuine remorse. "I'm sorry for laughing at you earlier," he admitted, his voice tinged with shame. "I had no idea. Your dish was amazing." To his surprise, Clara simply smiled and patted his arm. "Don't worry about it," she said kindly. "We all have moments where we underestimate someone or something. The important thing is that we keep learning and growing." Her grace and humility only deepened the admiration others felt for her. By the time the event wrapped up, Clara had become something of a local hero. People lingered around her station, asking questions, sharing stories, and marveling at her ability to create magic with such humble ingredients. Some even begged her to teach them her secrets, promising to spread the word about her incredible talent. Clara listened patiently, her smile never wavering, as she graciously thanked everyone for their support. But perhaps the most telling moment came when a young girl, no older than 10, shyly approached Clara holding a notebook and pen. "Can I have your autograph?" she asked, her eyes wide with admiration. Clara chuckled softly and knelt down to meet the girl at eye level. "Of course," she replied, signing the notebook with care. "But remember," she added gently, "the real secret to great cooking isn't fancy tools or expensive ingredients. It's putting your heart into everything you make." As the crowd slowly dispersed and the community center emptied out, Clara packed up her belongings and slipped away quietly, just as she had arrived. There were no grand speeches, no demands for attention, just a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had shared a piece of herself with the world. And though the trophy would soon find its place on her shelf alongside other mementos of her journey, Clara knew that the real reward lay not in the accolades, but in the connections she had forged and the lessons she had imparted. In the days that followed, whispers of Clara's triumph spread far beyond the confines of the small town. News outlets picked up her story, highlighting the unassuming woman who had silenced her critics with sheer talent and humility. Invitations poured in from culinary schools, festivals, and television shows, all eager to feature her as a guest speaker or mentor. Yet despite the newfound fame, Clara remained grounded, choosing to stay rooted in her quiet life. What mattered most to her wasn't the applause or recognition. It was the knowledge that she had reminded people of something fundamental, that greatness often hides in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to shine. And in doing so, Clara proved that sometimes the simplest things in life are the most extraordinary. In the weeks following her unexpected triumph at the cooking competition, Clara Bennett's life changed in ways both big and small. News of her victory spread like wildfire, not just within the confines of her small town, but far beyond it. Local newspapers ran glowing articles about the simple woman who had stunned judges and silenced skeptics with her humble yet exquisite dish. Social media buzzed with photos of Clara holding her trophy, her calm smile radiating a quiet confidence that captivated readers. Even national culinary magazines reached out, eager to feature her story and share her recipe with their audiences. Despite the sudden surge of attention, Clara remained steadfastly grounded. She politely declined most interview requests, explaining that she preferred to let her food speak for itself rather than seeking the spotlight. But there was one request she couldn't turn down, a proposal from the town council to host a free cooking class for aspiring chefs in the community. It wasn't glamorous or high profile, but it aligned perfectly with Clara's values: sharing knowledge, nurturing talent, and fostering a love for cooking among people of all ages. The announcement drew immediate interest. Flyers were posted around town, and word of mouth spread quickly. By the time the day of the class arrived, the community center was packed with eager participants, ranging from wide-eyed children to retirees hoping to pick up a new hobby. The room buzzed with excitement as Clara walked in, carrying her trusty wooden box filled with ingredients. She wore her signature faded apron and greeted everyone with a warm smile, instantly putting the nervous attendees at ease. Clara began the session by sharing a bit about her own journey, the struggles of her childhood, the lessons learned from her mother, and the joy she found in turning simple ingredients into something meaningful. Cooking isn't just about following recipes, she told the group. It's about understanding flavors, respecting your ingredients, and pouring a little piece of yourself into every dish you make. Her words resonated deeply, earning nods of agreement from the crowd. Then came the hands-on portion of the class. Clara chose to teach them how to make her award-winning pomme dauphine, explaining each step with clarity and patience. She demonstrated how to slice potatoes paper-thin without wasting any part of the vegetable, emphasizing the importance of efficiency and care. As she worked, she encouraged the students to ask questions, share their thoughts, and experiment with techniques. For many, it was their first time handling a knife or seasoning a dish from scratch, but Clara's gentle guidance made the process feel accessible and fun. One young boy named Ethan stood out during the session. He was shy and hesitant at first, unsure if he belonged in a room full of adults. But when Clara noticed him struggling to peel a potato, she knelt beside him and showed him a trick she had learned as a child. "See how you hold the peeler at an angle?" she said softly. "That way you don't waste any of the good stuff inside." Ethan's face lit up with pride as he successfully peeled his first potato, and by the end of the class he was beaming, proudly showing off his finished dish to his parents. As the hours passed, laughter and chatter filled the room. Strangers became friends, bonding over shared successes and occasional mishaps. When the final dishes emerged from the ovens, golden and fragrant, the entire group gathered around to taste the fruits of their labor. Clara moved from table to table, offering praise and constructive feedback, always finding something positive to highlight in each student's effort. Her kindness and encouragement left a lasting impression on everyone present. By the end of the class, the atmosphere was electric with gratitude and inspiration. Several participants approached Clara afterward, thanking her not just for teaching them a recipe, but for reigniting their passion for cooking. One woman tearfully confessed that she had given up on her dream of becoming a chef after years of self-doubt, but Clara's belief in simplicity and authenticity had restored her confidence. A teenage girl shyly handed Clara a handwritten note, expressing her hope of pursuing culinary school one day. Clara read it with a soft smile, tucking it carefully into her apron pocket. Word of the class spread quickly, prompting more requests for similar sessions. Clara agreed to host monthly workshops, each focusing on a different dish or technique. Over time, these gatherings became a beloved fixture in the community, drawing people from neighboring towns and even distant cities. What started as a single act of generosity blossomed into a movement of sorts, a celebration of food, creativity, and human connection. But Clara's impact extended beyond the classroom. Inspired by her humility and dedication, many of her former competitors reached out to express admiration and seek advice. Marcus, the brash young chef who had mocked her at the competition, surprised everyone by showing up at one of her classes. At first, he seemed out of place, his polished demeanor contrasting sharply with the casual vibe of the group. But as the session progressed, he relaxed, rolling up his sleeves and diving into the task with genuine enthusiasm. By the end of the day, he pulled Clara aside and thanked her sincerely for helping him see the value of simplicity and authenticity in cooking. Even the judges from the competition kept in touch, inviting Clara to serve as a guest mentor for future events. Though she rarely accepted such offers, she occasionally attended local contests to offer encouragement and support to budding chefs. Her presence alone was enough to inspire confidence in contestants, reminding them that true greatness often lies in subtlety and heart. Through it all, Clara remained unchanged. She continued living her quiet life, baking pies for church fundraisers, volunteering at the shelter, and hosting intimate dinners for friends and family. Yet her influence rippled outward, touching lives in ways she might never fully realize. People who had once underestimated her now spoke of her with reverence, not just as a talented cook but as a teacher, a mentor, and a beacon of humility. One evening, as Clara sat on her porch watching the sunset, she reflected on everything that had transpired since the competition. The trophies, the accolades, the newfound fame. They were nice, certainly, but they weren't what mattered most. What truly brought her joy was seeing others discover their own potential, watching them light up with pride as they created something beautiful with their own two hands. That, to Clara, was the real reward. And so, life went on in its quiet rhythm. Clara cooked, taught, and shared her love for food with anyone willing to listen. She didn't need grand gestures or public recognition to feel fulfilled. For her, happiness lay in the simple act of giving back. In doing so, she reminded everyone who crossed her path of an enduring truth: that greatness doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. It often arrives quietly, wrapped in warmth and wisdom, waiting for us to recognize its brilliance. Though Clara's name would eventually fade from headlines and social media feeds, her legacy endured. Generations of cooks, amateur and professional alike, would carry forward the lessons she imparted, passing them down like cherished heirlooms. And whenever someone savored the comforting aroma of roasted potatoes or marveled at the perfection of a crispy crust, they would remember Clara Bennett, the unassuming woman whose quiet strength transformed not just a dish, but an entire community. Years passed, and Clara Bennett's influence continued to ripple through the town and beyond, shaping lives in ways both visible and unseen. Her cooking classes became a cherished tradition, drawing participants from all walks of life who sought not only to learn recipes but also to embrace the philosophy behind her approach: simplicity, patience, and love. The community center where she taught was always filled with laughter, chatter, and the comforting aroma of food being prepared with care. What had started as a small gathering for locals grew into something much larger, a testament to the power of connection and shared purpose. Clara's students ranged from wide-eyed children eager to help their parents in the kitchen to retirees, looking for a creative outlet after years spent working. Some came hoping to refine their skills for family dinners. Others dreamed of opening restaurants or pursuing careers in culinary arts. Regardless of their goals, everyone left Clara's classes with more than just a newfound ability to cook. They left inspired. They carried with them stories of resilience, lessons about the importance of humility, and a renewed appreciation for the magic that happens when you pour your heart into what you create. One of Clara's most devoted students was Ethan, the shy boy who had once struggled to peel a potato during his first class. Now a teenager, Ethan had blossomed under Clara's guidance. He became a regular at her workshops, soaking up every piece of advice she offered. Over time, he developed a passion for baking, spending hours experimenting with breads, pastries, and cakes in his family's kitchen. When he turned 16, Ethan decided to enter a regional baking competition, a bold move for someone so young. Though nervous, he remembered Clara's words. Cooking isn't about proving yourself better than anyone else. It's about sharing a part of yourself with those who taste your food. On the day of the competition, Clara surprised Ethan by showing up to support him. She sat quietly in the audience, her presence calming his nerves. When Ethan's name was called as the runner-up, he beamed with pride, not because he had won an award, but because he had made Clara proud. Afterward, she hugged him tightly and said, "You've already won, Ethan. You've shown courage, creativity, and kindness. That's what matters most." Those words stayed with him long after the event ended, guiding him as he pursued his dreams. Clara's impact wasn't limited to her students. Many of her former competitors from the original cooking contest reached out over the years, seeking her advice or simply expressing gratitude for the perspective she had given them. Marcus, the brash chef who had mocked her initially, transformed in ways no one could have predicted. Inspired by Clara's example, he shifted his focus from flashy techniques to meaningful storytelling through food. His restaurant gained acclaim, not for its extravagance but for its soulful dishes that celebrated local ingredients and traditions. During interviews, Marcus often credited Clara for teaching him that greatness doesn't shout, it whispers. Even the judges from that fateful day remained touched by Clara's quiet brilliance. One of them, a renowned food critic, wrote a glowing article about her, calling her the unsung hero of modern cuisine. The piece highlighted not just her culinary prowess, but also her humility and generosity. It sparked renewed interest in Clara's story, leading to invitations to prestigious events around the country. While she declined most offers, Clara agreed to speak at a national culinary conference, where she delivered a heartfelt speech about the transformative power of food. To me, she told the audience, cooking is more than a skill. It's a way of connecting with others. Every dish we prepare carries a piece of our history, our emotions, and our hopes. Whether it's a humble plate of roasted potatoes or an elaborate feast, the act of sharing food reminds us of our shared humanity. So don't worry about perfection or impressing others. Focus instead on creating something that brings joy, comfort, and love to those who eat it. Her words resonated deeply, earning a standing ovation from the crowd. For many in attendance, Clara's message served as a wake-up call, a reminder to return to the essence of why they fell in love with cooking in the first place. Back home, Clara continued living her quiet life, content in the knowledge that she had planted seeds of inspiration wherever she went. Her wooden box of ingredients still accompanied her to every class, though it now bore even more scratches and scuffs from years of use. Her faded apron remained a constant companion, its fabric softened by countless washings. To outsiders, these items might have seemed ordinary, but to those who knew Clara, they symbolized decades of dedication, wisdom, and warmth. As the years rolled on, Clara eventually slowed down, hosting fewer classes and spending more time tending to her garden. She grew herbs, vegetables, and flowers, finding peace in the rhythm of nature. Neighbors often stopped by to chat, bringing baked goods or jars of preserves as tokens of gratitude. Children loved visiting her house, where they were always greeted with warm hugs and plates of freshly baked cookies. Even strangers passing through town would hear about Clara's legendary cooking and make detours just to catch a glimpse of the woman whose story had touched so many. When Clara finally passed away at the age of 82, the entire town mourned her loss. A memorial service was held at the community center, the same place where she had taught countless lessons and inspired generations. The room overflowed with people, friends, family, students, and admirers, all united by their love for Clara. Photos of her lined the walls, capturing moments of her smiling as she stirred a pot, handed out slices of pie, or leaned over to guide a student's hand. In the center of the room stood a table laden with dishes prepared by her former students, each one a tribute to the woman who had changed their lives. Ethan, now a successful baker, delivered a eulogy that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Clara taught me how to bake," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, but more importantly, she taught me how to believe in myself. She showed me that greatness isn't about fame or fortune. It's about making the world a little brighter, one meal at a time. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for her. After the service, attendees lingered, sharing stories and memories of Clara. Someone suggested starting a scholarship fund in her name to help young chefs pursue their dreams. The idea quickly gained traction, and within weeks, donations poured in from across the country. The Clara Bennett Culinary Scholarship became a lasting legacy, ensuring that future generations would benefit from her wisdom and generosity. In the years that followed, Clara's story lived on, not just in the scholarships awarded or the dishes prepared in her honor, but in the hearts of those she had touched. Her belief in the power of food to heal, connect, and transform endured, inspiring countless others to pick up a whisk, a knife, or a rolling pin and create something meaningful. And so, Clara Bennett's legacy remained alive, in the laughter of children learning to cook, in the aroma of freshly baked bread wafting through kitchens, and in the quiet confidence of cooks everywhere who understood that true greatness lies not in complexity, but in the simple act of sharing love through food. Though she was gone, her spirit lingered, reminding everyone fortunate enough to know her that sometimes the simplest things in life leave the deepest impressions.